Thanks for tuning in to the Drive On podcast, where we are focused on giving hope and strength to the entire military community. Whether you're a veteran, active duty, guard, reserve, or a family member, this podcast will share inspirational stories and resources that are useful to you. I'm your host, Scott DeLucio, and now let's get on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Drive On podcast. Today, my guest is Jeff Clark. Jeff is an Air Force veteran, host of the Course of Action podcast, and author of the new book, Hear These Truths. So welcome to the show, Jeff. Glad to have you on. Excited to get into your story a little bit and talk about your book, your background, and everything like that. So thanks for coming on.
Oh yeah, man. I appreciate you having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So why don't you go ahead, tell us a little bit about yourself and your background for people who may not be familiar with you.
Sure. Yeah. I was born and raised in Oklahoma. Didn't see a whole lot of the world. Needed a bit of a career after high school. Went to 2 years of college and it just wasn't feeling it, man. Went to 2 years of college, left with 1 year of credits. So it just wasn't, it wasn't in the cards for me at that time. Me and my wife, or my girlfriend at the time, kind of said, if we want to start a family and go somewhere, we got to do something serious. And kind of halfway doing college wasn't cutting it. So I looked at the military and decided on the Air Force. My brother-in-law was active duty at the time, so he kind of pushed me in that direction. And I joined the military, joined the Air Force 12 and a half years later, after several joint assignments, a lot of really good experiences. I was medically retired. And I had my master's degree, had my bachelor's degree and all that at the time. So, I thought I'd step off into the real world, no problems. And I went back to work for the government, for the Air Force as a civilian leader. And I was the 2019 Air Force Civilian Supervisor of the Year, which was a really, really big deal and a testament to the people that worked for me at the time. So, yeah, man, here I am now, working for Space Force. About to go back to the Air Force for another job. But yeah, that's kind of me in a nutshell, 12 and a half years active duty, the last almost 5 as a government civilian, and, kind of loving every minute of it.
So you just mentioned that you're working for Space Force, and that's as a civilian contractor at this point, right?
No, I'm a government employee for them.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Cool. So you're the first person with any connection to the Space Force whatsoever that I've had on this podcast. I've actually been, keeping track of all the different branches, whether people are currently serving or if they're in, one capacity or another, or if they're veterans or whatever. And, vast majority, Army, Marines, then I had a couple Coast Guard and, things like that. But, up until this point, zero with any affiliation to the Space Force. So congratulations, you're number one.
Well, thanks. That's awesome.
So, that's cool. When I was doing some research for this episode, I was looking into you and your background a little bit, and I came across an article that you wrote a few months ago about your story and how you talked about how your physical health was affecting your mental health. And tell us about some of the physical issues that you were facing. What was going on with that, and what you attempted to do while you're still in the Air Force to address some of those issues.
So I didn't know the medical process very well. I worked in a medical job, but I worked in logistics. So I was in the back of the building. I didn't know medical. I did my CPR every year like I was supposed to, and that's about the extent of it. When they called a code and they were running down the hallway, I stepped to the side. You know what I mean? Like, right. I had no business in there. But I didn't know the medical process any better than anybody else did. So, when I got hurt and I kind of they told me nothing was wrong, I shrugged it off and I just kept pushing. And I had torn my rotator cuff and my shoulder up pretty bad early on in my career. Did some x-rays. They told me it was just fine. It was just a sprain. Go to physical therapy, walk it off. That's exactly what I did. 7 years later, I'm still having problems, still working out PTing and all that, doing what I'm supposed to, but I'm still having problems with my shoulder. And then I started having problems with my back. And I went to the doctor again. I was like, I just don't think something's right. I'm having back problems, I'm having shoulder problems, my posture's poor, I'm just not I'm feeling heavy. That heavy feeling you get when you don't feel healthy. I had that. And he was like, yeah, let's take a look at your shoulder again. Took a look at it and said, yeah, dude, your shoulder is jacked. Like, I'm surprised. He's like, don't ever swing anything. Don't swing a baseball bat. Don't swing a golf club. He's like, your shoulder will come out of socket. And I'm not a very good golfer at all, so I don't even play. But that was the silver lining. But
Right.
yeah, it just got worse from there. And then they did an MRI of my back, and it turned out that I had fractured my back at one point in time, and it was misdiagnosed. The Air Force missed it completely. I've been walking around with a fractured back, like 2 ruptured discs and a slip disc in my back. And he was like, I cannot believe you walked in here under your own power without, screaming in pain. And, from there, that's why I was medically retired, was from my back and my shoulder. And it just was irreparable after that. The VA did some surgeries on me. I still don't feel the same. So I wasn't fit for active duty anymore. It was the bottom line. I was a liability to people around me, health wise. So when I got out and was, subject to the VA, they helped me out quite a bit. I have better stories from the VA than some of my peers do. But, it really caught up to me. And for several years now, I never knew what my physical health was doing to my mental state of mind and to my attitude. And it was just something that eventually somebody brought to my attention, a former veteran, former Green Beret. And he said, man, let me holler at you for a second. Let me see if you're getting everything that you're supposed to be getting from the VA. And I was like, dude, I'm at like 70%. I'm good. I'm not worried about it. And he was like, no, man, here, let me see your record. Let me pull up your e-benefits and let's go over it. And he saw all these different things that were service connected I wasn't getting a rating for. And he was like, what are you doing about that? I was like, nothing. Like, I'm 70%. I'm good. Like, I got good paychecks. I'm not concerned with it. And he was like, no, man, have you ever talked to anybody about this? I said, nope. He said, have you ever talked to anybody about PTSD and anxiety because of these injuries? And I was like, nope, never would have thought of it. I was like one of the many people who just associated PTSD with combat. And I didn't think nothing of it. I didn't think post-traumatic stress was anything other than, combat related type of experiences. I was wrong.
Right.
And he kind of told me a little bit about it. And I was like, okay, cool. I'll look into it someday. And then I mentioned it to my wife like a month later. She was like, I don't want to like say anything to upset you, but maybe he's making some sense. So I was like, okay, maybe so. And I went to the VA and talked to him about it. And turns out I had anxiety. I had all kinds of feelings and thoughts and stuff that was driving home my mental state. And I wrote that article that you're referencing. I put it on my website. I wrote it on Veterans Day. And I kind of gave a shout out to the boot campaign for some of the stuff that they're doing in relating to that. And I thought it was really important to share my message of why I went to go do that and what I was thinking, because I was struggling to do things around the house. Anything from vacuuming, just putting stress on my back, to, fixing stuff outside. And when you're on a limited budget, you only have one spouse in the house working, you tend to, try to cut some corners, instead of paying somebody to come fix your gutter, you try to do it yourself. Right. And I'm a real hands-on guy, and I like to fix things myself. And, I can admittedly be a little cheap, but I was just to the point, man, where I just, I couldn't do that. And it was our move to Colorado. We moved to Colorado to take this job with the Space Force. And I alone, because my wife didn't go with me on this one, I alone had to unpack our house, so I did that over the course of like a month and a half, and I almost killed myself. I mean, I was waking up every day, popping Motrin. I was sleeping with a heating pad on my back. Like, it was, one, it wasn't very smart for me to do. And two, it was just to the point where I was like, okay, I cannot physically do the same things that I used to be able to do, not because of age or anything, just simply because of the physical limitations from those injuries. And it made me bad. I realized how angry and kind of like emotional I was about it. And that's really kind of what kicked it off, man. And then after that, I just kind of embraced it. I talked to the VA, went through some counseling with them, got the anxiety diagnosis, and I just understood it better. And, I got on some medication to help me out. I talked to some other veterans about it, realized that it wasn't as big of a deal and it was more common than I thought. And I really just kind of embraced it after that. It also helps that my wife is working now, so we have two incomes. So when something breaks around here, I'm kind of like, hey, all right, let's call the best plumber we know or whatever. But it was just one of those realizations. And then I said, well, I can't be quiet about it. I need to share it because there's other people out there who maybe are not in the same situation as me, and they need to hear that. They need to hear that, those things happen and it's okay to be fragile mentally.
Right. And that's one of the things I wanted to touch on with you when we're having this conversation here is, that, like you said, PTSD and anxiety and some of these other mental things that are connected to things that happen to you in the service, they don't necessarily have to be from combat related things. So, we have a lot of people, especially, over the last 20 years who've been to combat, who have experienced a lot of these things. And that's the stuff that hits the news. That's the stuff that we all hear about. But, PTSD can come from any number of different things. And all of these things that affect you physically, you go from this, this guy who's, physically fit and capable of doing things, lifting heavy things, swinging things, doing whatever it is. Right. And then now you go to a point where you're telling yourself, or other people are telling you can't do this anymore. You physically can't do this anymore. And, that's got to take a toll on you you
got to tell yourself that too. That was the hardest part. I was telling myself that because, I had a really good doc when I was down in San Antonio when this first kind of became a problem, and he redid the imaging and x-rays and MRI. He's like, dude, you should be medically boarded. He's like, I'm going to try to hide you for a little while, but eventually the flags are going to get raised and you're going to be in trouble. He's like, so just know that it's coming, but you need to take care of yourself so that this doesn't become worse and you don't wind up in a wheelchair or something crazy like that. I said, cool. And, I didn't really tell myself until I felt it so physically painful that it made sense. Like I've been told before by doctors and other people, you can't do what you used to. I'm tough. I'll tough it out. But like I said, it was that move to Colorado. I just could not. I had to recover every day from what I did the previous days. And it seemed like I was doing just as much recovering as I was unboxing and putting things away, even though my kids are a little more grown, so they could help.
Yeah.
But, they couldn't lift the heavy things, so that was a mistake on my part for not listening. And I hope other people, when they hear this conversation, they understand that I made a mistake on my part and I didn't tell myself. I heard it from other people, but I didn't tell myself. And, I suffered the physical consequences of that, unfortunately, and, mistake on my part.
Yeah. And the other thing that I wanted to point out to people who are listening to this too, is that you sort of have to be your own advocate as well when you're dealing with some of these doctors who might give you a diagnosis that says, everything's fine. In your case. I had a very similar situation when I was in Afghanistan. We were on a mission. We were getting off the back of a helicopter. It was at night, so we had our night vision goggles on. Anyone who's ever worn those knows it's very limited depth perception that you have, right? You can't tell if something's 5 feet away or 10 feet.
Yeah.
Like it's hard to
not
tell
like
that,
on
right?
Call of Duty.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's not like where it's like everything's the same and it's just green. Like it's not that.
Not the movies.
Yeah. So So we're getting off this helicopter, and I'm given the green light to go. I'm the first one to step off, and with all the equipment and everything I'm wearing, it's easily over 100 pounds that I'm carrying of stuff, and the helicopter isn't fully touched down at this point. Like it's probably 3-4 feet up, but the way I'm looking at it is I'm thinking we're down on the ground, and so I'm stepping off as if I'm stepping down onto ground, and I had like 3-4 feet of a fall, and I'm not ready to catch myself that way, right?
Yep.
And I totally screwed up my knee, and so I get back home, and I go to the VA to go get it checked out, see what's going on with that, and you'll be fine. Just stay off it for a couple months, and just take some Motrin if it's getting real bad. Well, at this point, it had already been a couple months. Like, I was suffering with it for a couple months. It's like I don't know how much more I could stay off of it. So fortunately, I was in the National Guard, so I had a civilian job, and with civilian insurance, private insurance and everything like that. So I went to go get a second opinion outside of the VA, because I was like, this guy clearly doesn't have a clue what he's talking about. And turns out I needed surgery, and he's like, just like you, he's like, I don't know how you're walking in here. Like, it's so, your knee was so screwed up. I don't know how you're walking in here. So, all that to say, you kind of have to be your own advocate with these things. If something doesn't smell right, like, you got to say something, and you got to stand up for yourself. Don't just accept the fact that this person, has their medical degree, that they're a doctor or whatever, that they know everything, that they're going to know what's best for you and everything, because they very well may not, and they may have some have missed something in their diagnosis, right? And so if something isn't right, like, say something. And keep pushing to get yourself the treatment that you need, especially while you're still in, because that way everything gets documented. You can say, this is service connected, later on down the line. So that way, when it comes time to file for like a disability thing through the VA, which I've talked about at length in other episodes on this podcast. So anyone's looking for information on that, we can share a link to that episode as well. For sure. It is a process, but one thing I do want to say to people, though, who might be like, oh, I don't want to do that, because if I file and I'm not that bad, I'm going to take away from someone else who is worse off than me. It's totally not true. That's not how it works. No. And as a matter of fact, I had someone who used to head up the benefits department at the VA, and he explained the whole process of how that works. And it doesn't matter how many people apply and are approved for this. You're not taking anything away from anyone. It's not like they have a fixed budget of X amount of dollars every year that they can give to people. Like, that's one of those like floating numbers. Like, they can increase that amount of money that's allocated to it based on how many people are at need. So so don't sit around just not filing for the benefits if you legitimately are owed that kind of
I kind of felt like that at first too. Like, I was at 70%. 70% is not a bad paycheck. It's not bad at all. But there was things that I needed to get documented, and I told my son this. My son's on active duty now, and I told him the best piece of advice I got on active duty was by an old retired E7. He was about to retire, walking out the door as I was walking in, basically. Yeah. And he said, hey, make sure every time you have a cold, every time you have a temperature, every time you have this and that, you go see the doc and get it in your medical record. I thought, that's pretty stupid advice. I'm not a baby. I'm not going to go every time. Right. I need that. And he was like, no, seriously. You tweak your knee, you hurt yourself with PT, you do this or that. He's like, just go and have it documented, even if they brush you off, because it's going to matter later on when you take that medical record to the VA and they're looking over stuff. It might not be an issue now, but when you're 52 years old and your knee gives out, you're going to need help and you're going to want help. And he was like, you might as well get all that you can. And I'm glad he told me that, because eventually the healthcare system changed. We have federal laws that, without getting into too many politics of it, the federal laws changed, and it's healthcare is a different thing now in the United
Right.
States. So it's good to have all the help you get. I'm like triple insured now. I have TRICARE retiree. I have stuff from the VA. My wife's insurance, like, you
Right.
know, but it comes at a cost,
It
and
does.
you know, it's expensive.
Yeah, and if you didn't have all that documentation going into this, it would be harder for you to, get approved for some of
Yeah,
the stuff that
because then
you
you got to
have
find
now.
it. You got to get
Exactly.
the documentation. You got to
Well,
give it to the VA. They got to run their process,
yeah,
and then you're just sitting there praying that they approve it. And I
yeah,
mean, it doesn't happen on the first time every time. So I mean, you got to do every little thing you can. Talking to other veterans, listening to podcasts like this, and getting all the tips and tricks you can, because you could shoot yourself in the foot filing through the VA.
hmm
And like an appeal. If you do an appeal, an appeal takes forever. You're better off just saying, okay, you deny me that claim, I'm going to refile. It's little things like that you got to learn. And the documentation itself is a monster. So having anything, that's why I told my son the same advice. It's like, just go to the doctor. It's free. It doesn't
yeah,
cost you anything. You
right,
have no reason not to go. Just go and talk to them, because you're gonna want to have it documented later
yeah,
on when you really, really need it, and you don't want to assume you won't.
yeah, and I got that same advice from people too, and it was a little different being in the National Guard, because it wasn't like there was a like a army doc that we could just walk into
Right.
while we're at our weekend drill or whatever.
Yeah.
But it wasn't like that. But whenever like something big did come up, make an appointment, go down to the local facility, and get that documented and make sure
Yeah.
that it's in your record.
Yeah.
And it makes a ton of sense. It doesn't make any sense that you wouldn't do that. Just get all that stuff in writing, in your permanent record, and that way when it comes time to file for things down the line. And I was one of those people who back then I was like, I'm never going to file for any sort of disability. I don't need that. And I was one of those people too. It was like, I don't want to take away from somebody else who needs
Yeah.
it more than me. I'll be fine without it. But now I look back on it and it's like, well, if I didn't have all this documentation, it would be much harder, right now,
Oh yeah.
trying to figure that stuff out. So it's a good point that you're making there, as far as, documentation, all that kind of stuff. So you mentioned, you got out, you're medically retired, and obviously there's a recovery process for some of this stuff, right? There's stuff that you had to do, not only for the physical stuff, right? You probably had some stuff that you had to do for that. You mentioned some surgeries, but also the mental side of things. Like, what was the process, the recovery process, and the healing for you throughout this whole process?
So I think I was kind of in a haze for like the 6 or 7 months after I left active duty. I had enough time where the last like 2.5 months on active duty, I was chilling at home, growing the beard out, just enjoying collecting the paycheck. And my wife was like, hey, eventually you're going to have to look for a job. And I was like, I will, I'm just enjoying this moment. Nothing that doesn't really dawn on you,
Yeah.
even at the retirement ceremony, when you get the certificates and you get the flag, and you go home and you hang the uniform up for the very last time. It's surreal, but at the same time, you don't really realize it. It was the next day that kind of hit me a little bit. I had to decide what I was going to get up and wear. I didn't have camouflage to just put on. Interviews, when I went on an interview, that was different. I had to figure out, never really worn a tie unless it was given to me, type of thing.
Right.
And I would say it was like 6 months later when I was working for a beer distributor here in town, and nobody there was former military. Nobody. There was one other guy that eventually came on board around the same time that I did, but nobody else there knew it. It was just really me and him. And that's when it struck me. I'm different, in a not in a like a egotistical way, but these guys didn't talk the talk that I did. They didn't walk it the same way.
Right.
I realized the difference between me and a civilian. And that's when it was a little different. That's when, oh man, I wish I could. I looked driving by the base. I looked at the gate differently. Beforehand, I looked at it as a burden. Like, I hope there's not a lot of traffic. This stupid place again. We all have had those mumbles to ourselves. I looked at it like, I wish I could drive through it again.
Right. Right.
So for me, it was kind of, I missed the culture. I missed the environment. And I really had to focus on my physical health. And, I was just getting off of a back surgery. I needed to have a shoulder surgery. And trying to get all my affairs in order, get back to being a, civilian again and not wearing, uniform. It was a lot of focusing on getting those needed things done. But I was missing the culture. So when I went back to work for the government as a civilian, I was right back in that same culture as a civilian, but I still got to be around it. And that helped a lot. Just because, my career didn't end. A lot of people, they hit 20 and they say, I'm going to stick it out a couple more years, or nah, I'm done. 20, I'm punching. It's their decision. It wasn't my decision to leave. I didn't want to go. I had things I wanted to accomplish in my career still. So medical retirement, although the med board process takes a long time, you just kind of don't want it to happen. So, when they give you that result and you got 45 days to leave, it's, you don't have time to process it, so it wasn't until, probably 6 or 7 months later to where I was kind of like, okay, this is different. And I need to get back to that and kind of move on. And I was telling somebody the other day, we were talking about military transition, and I've been retired almost 6 years now. And I was like, there's still days where I wish, or I say I would have, the woulda, coulda, shouldas, happen even to this day. And I think it's just one of those things where it's ingrained in you. It's never going to fully go away, but you have to learn how to kind of embrace it and understand it and use it to mold yourself and kind of push yourself forward.
Yeah, you definitely do. And I think in your case, it's a little bit different. Other people kind of see the light at the end of the tunnel coming. They know there's a certain date, and they know, okay, I want to put in my 20 and be done, or whatever the time period is, and so they probably can prepare for it a little bit better than that. But it's not uncommon for people, like you said, you never wore a tie other than the probably issued with your uniform, right?
Never had to.
Never had to, and
I wore a clip on, so I didn't even know how to tie one.
Yeah, there you go, right? And so there's that. Then on top of that, you've probably never really had to go to an interview, right? Coming into the military, and that's not uncommon either, and so now you're floating around in this whole new world. And the strange thing is, and I've said this before, is before anyone has joined the military, they were a civilian at one point, but they have to relearn how to be a civilian after getting out.
You do.
It's so strange to say it that way, because we've all experienced being a civilian, but we experienced it at a different point in our lives. A lot of people getting in at 18, 19 years old didn't have to apply for a professional job with a resume and, all that kind of stuff. Going on the interviews and everything, just didn't need to do it. So then you go and spend 20 plus years in the military, and you're getting out. Now you're in your 40s, potentially mid 40s, and you've never been on an interview in your life. And you're going and sitting down with someone who's interviewing you, and they're looking at you like, how the hell do you not know how to do this? Like, where have you been all this time? It's like, well, you didn't need to, because all that stuff was just an experience that you just never had. And so, your situation's not really much different from someone who put in their 20 plus years. It's just that timeline got a little accelerated for you.
I didn't really know what to do. My very first interview was with the beer company, and I went in for the interview. It was like 15 minutes long, and they asked me all the cliche questions. What do you bring to the team? What's your greatest strength? What's your weakness? All that. those are fairly easy to answer because, being from the military, I know leadership, I know this, I can stay organized, I can stay on task. I'm a doer, blah, blah, blah. That wasn't bad. It was the civilian interview for the military that I did because I had never done one of those before, where it was like an hour long. It was for a specific job. So I had like my sheet of notes reminding me of all these things that I used to do on active duty and what it had to do with the specific position and all that. And they didn't ask me anything related to it, nothing. And I was just like, I'm texting, and it was like a phone call. I didn't go in for it. And I'm texting my buddy because he knows I'm on this interview. I'm texting him as they're asking me questions. I'm like, dude, they're not asking me any of this. They're not asking me nothing. He's like, don't freak out. Just keep going. And I was like, I don't have this job. I'm losing it. And it was like, it was crazy. And then years later, I go to work for that same squadron and I'm doing the interviews. And I'm like, I had to ask my boss, I'm like, well, hey, I don't know what to do here. I've barely had enough interviews myself, not let alone what do I ask? What's legal to ask? What isn't legal to ask? Like, I don't know. Mm-hmm. He set me down and helped me out. It's like, here, ask some of these things, ask some of those. Just make sure you ask everybody the same questions. If you only get through 6 or 7 of them, that's fine. And it's weird. You think being military, you're so equipped to go out into the world because you have all these skills. You have all these intangibles, but you have intangibles for the job you're currently doing. You don't necessarily have the intangibles for things you're going to go do. So learning how to do that. I mean, even writing a resume, you think it'd be a cakewalk, right? I didn't realize how far behind the power curve I was. I missed out on so many jobs because I thought my resume was just basic. Like, no, it was like 5 years older than the current format. I mean, I probably wasn't even into consideration because of the way it just looked.
Right.
Learning those things is tough, man.
And one thing that I've learned too over the last couple of years is that certain companies, especially like bigger companies, when they put out a job opening, they get so many applications coming in, and it would just be impossible for any one person to sit down and read through all these applications. So they have the software that actually will go through some of these resumes and the cover letters and all that. And if these things don't include certain keywords, it just kicks them out, and boom, all of a sudden that person isn't even in consideration. They could be a great candidate, you know. Yeah.
But it's about the resume. It doesn't speak for you like it used to. Yeah. It seems like the resume used to be, if you were good on your resume, you're interesting enough to talk to. Nowadays, you have to have, like you said, you have to have the right things on your resume to even be put in the other pile, or go to the trash can, And I didn't know that. Nobody told me that. Nobody around me, I knew that. My parents they had gone from job to job, but it was because they knew people, so they didn't do a lot of interviews either. So they weren't, a huge help because they couldn't be. But nobody told me that. And I didn't learn that until I talked to some of my buddies. I was losing out on jobs. I'm perfectly qualified for this. Why am I not getting it? And one of my friends was like, man, let me see your resume. I sent it to him and he was like, what is this? What is this? Like, it's my resume, man. This is what they taught me in transition assistance, how to do my resume. I kind of did it like they did it. And he's like, no. Send me these documents that you got from the military. Send me all this stuff, your old evaluations, and then let me redo your resume. And he sent me back like this 20-page thing of everything. He's like, this is your master resume. Save this and don't ever edit it. And then he's like, and then I'm going to send you, he sent me like a small resume, like a 2-pager. And then I was like, what is all this? Like, I just didn't know. I think the moral of the story for people who are listening is don't be afraid to go out there and get some transition help from other veterans, from people who've been doing it. Don't be afraid to ask for help. There's tons of people out there who want to help you, will do it for free, and you need that help. I promise you need that help, because the way things are going today electronically, you're out of the running before you even apply if you don't do certain things correctly.
Right, exactly. And I was going to mention that too. There's organizations out there who just exist to help veterans with their whether they're starting a small business or career, starting a new career, looking at their resume, going over, even just doing like mock interviews. So that way it's not the first time that you're doing an interview when you're sitting down in the actual interview that counts and matters.
Yes.
And then they can give you points and tips on how to do it better, and what you might have said wrong or did wrong or whatever. Like, why not take advantage of those things? It may seem like it's
free,
the drag and it's a pain in the ass, but like, just do it and you'll do so much better with the actual interviews that do matter, so.
Well, and for your mental state too, go get some help. And if you get beat out on an interview after you got all that assistance, you can kind of know that you got beat out by a better candidate, as opposed to something that was in your control. If you don't go get help and you just submit what you think is good, and then you lose out on the jobs, that's your fault. That's you have control over that. Go get some help. And if you get beat out by a better man or woman, it is what it is. Sure. But, don't shoot yourself in the foot.
No, exactly. Yeah, you can't do that. You need to take advantage of all the help that's out there.
Yeah, and absolutely.
And don't try to just wing it and be like, oh yeah, I'll get this just because I have this experience or that experience. Like, a lot of times, some of the employers don't even care about some of that stuff. No. They don't know the military the way we might know the military, and some of that experience doesn't even matter to them. So don't get like this inflated ego thinking that all that stuff is gonna just write yourself a ticket to whatever job you want, right?
Yeah.
So hey, so I mentioned at the top of this episode that you're the host of the Course of Action podcast, and also the author of the book, Hear These Truths. I'd like to give you some time to talk a little bit about both of those, if you could, and tell us about that. I know the book is coming out here shortly, or it may be out by the time this episode comes out. So tell us about that stuff, and go from there.
So I started the podcast as kind of a way to have some conversations with people that I wouldn't normally get a chance to have conversations with. Some authors, some business people, nonprofits. It was something I started during the kind of the height of the pandemic and kind of established and built. And then I had to build up the courage to do, because I was really worried about people judging it or whether or not they listen. And then when I finally got to the point where I was like, you know what, I really don't care. I don't care if anybody listens. I'm having these conversations kind of for me. The byproduct is, getting listeners and helping other people out through the conversation.
Right.
So I did that just as kind of a way to have conversations and kind of reach a new audience and be able to just have conversations, mainly because I was stuck at home. I was working at home. I wasn't talking to a whole lot of people as it was. So it was kind of perfect for me to do. And I enjoy it. I'm not overly worried about cranking out episodes or anything. But I do have some guests lined up. I have some, episodes recorded, and it's a good little thing to do, I think, to kind of give me another avenue of creative expression. And I encourage anybody who's listening to go do the same. Find out podcasts like this one and say, hey, gauge your interest in, being a guest and have some conversations, because you don't know what your story is going to do for someone else. So why not share it? Podcasting isn't exactly free to do, but, it's free to be a guest. So, you might as well look around and give it a shot, because it's fun. I'm enjoying it. Mm-hmm. The book, probably around the time this is released, it'll be coming out. We're looking at an April release date here in 2022 for the book. I wrote the book because when I won that Civilian Supervisor of the Year award, I won it kind of on the accomplishments of the people that worked for me, because I was in a civilian leadership position where I had a whole lot of responsibility, but all these people below me, or not below me, that worked for me, they had a lot of responsibility. I looked good because they did good jobs and they looked good. I looked bad when they didn't have their stuff together. That was how it worked, and I just happened to look really, really good for all the really, really good work that they did. And I just kind of told myself, the trophy's nice. The the recognition is nice, but what is it if you don't do something with it? And I had a conversation with one of my employees at the time, and they were like, you want it because you're an excellent leader. You want it because we all wanted to work hard for you. So just understand that there's two sides to that. Yeah, we did great work and you can take a lot of credit for that, but it was because we wanted to, and we wanted to show up to work every day. You really need to share your side of it with people because it's something special. I didn't really think much of it at the time. I'm not a self-centered type of person either. So I was kind of like, well, I'm not going to write a book about myself. I mean, how egocentric is that, So I really just started writing down all my leadership thoughts and some of my experiences that molded me and got me there. And I hated it. I absolutely hated it. I was like, this is just a book about my stuff. Nobody's going to read this. Why does anybody care? And it was after having a discussion with a publisher, and they were like, we focus on veterans writing books and using it as a creative outlet and as a, means of therapy. I started telling him about the idea of this book, and he was like, I like it, but you need a little something. So go back, go write. And then, let's talk again in like 6 months. I thought, crap, I blew it. He doesn't like it. He already knows. And he called me like that December and said, hey, are you going to submit anything to us? I said, no, I'm not ready. He's like, I don't care. Submit me what you have. I want to see it. So I submitted him like the first 3 chapters and like this idea for organizing the book around an algorithm. And it was effort plus processes equals progress, and how you as a leader have to put efforts into a lot of things, into a lot of different processes. And a lot of times you'll get some kind of progress as a result. It's good and bad sometimes. And the things you need to focus on and how you do that, and all this fancy big level strategical stuff that I had learned from being a civilian leader. He was like, I love it. Go for it. And I cranked it out in like 3 months just because I had that thumbs up. And I titled it Hear These Truths because it's an honest look at leadership. It's an honest look at my leadership experiences. And then I built it around that algorithm of effort plus process equals progress, and how you handle those things as the leader. And it kind of just, by no means is my way or method the perfect way, but it's what got me where I was. So I felt like I should share. And even if it only helps one person out, only one book gets sold, it's mission accomplished.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. And I think sharing stories like that, where there's a success in there, it opens up people's minds to, other ways of doing things. And I think that's important to share with people, because sometimes we get in our own way and we stand there and do the same thing over and over again, and we're expecting to just, okay, if I just do this same thing and do it harder and do it more, I'll come up with a different result. But it's like you're not doing anything different. You're just doing the same thing. How do you expect to have anything better come out of it? So when you have someone like yourself who has a success story, who has been successful doing the things that you're doing, with a certain process that you're going through, that might just be the light bulb that goes off in someone's head when they pick up this book and they're like, okay, you know what, this does make sense.
Yeah.
Why, where was I all this time? Why wasn't I doing this all this time? And now they look at it and say, well, crap. Now I know what I need to do. Now I have a roadmap to get me to where I need to go. So, I think it's incredibly important to share stories like that. And that goes for anyone, not just yourself, but anyone who's out there who has had any sort of success doing something in their life, even if it's, overcoming an adversity. You may not feel like that's a success, but, if you've had a struggle in your life of whatever it is, and you've figured out how to overcome that, like that success could be somebody else's roadmap to get them to where they need to go. Right.
Your story matters.
Exactly. I think I say that to a lot of people, but I think, everybody has a story in them. We've all experienced life in different ways. We've all done things different ways. And if we just keep all that information to ourselves, how's that struggle worth worth it to other people? You know,
Yeah.
how are you bettering the people who are around you? Even if all you tell is your family, your friends, your neighbors, coworkers, whatever. At least that helps those people in that small circle. People like yourself who've written a book and have it out there for the whole world to see. Now you're not just impacting your own small circle of people, you're impacting, people all over the place. And you may never even know some of the people that you've impacted, which is a cool thing too. But you'll know that at some point that there's going to be that effect where it's helping other people. So I encourage other people too to go out there and share their story. Whether it's writing a book, you may not be the best writer. I wrote a book and I probably have English teachers who are scratching their head like, how the hell did he do that? But just put something out there. Even you just start a blog or something, and just start writing and putting stuff out there. And, you can always tweak it later on if you want, but, well, cool. Yeah, no, I'm glad you got to share that. Where will people be able to go to, first off, listen to your podcast, but also, when the book is out, where will people be able to go to get a copy of the book?
So you can listen to the Course of Action podcast on all the major platforms. I just started a YouTube channel where I'm uploading some of the episodes there. So just search Course of Action. You can find it there. The book will be available through a link on my website, but it'll be available through all the big retailers, Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and all that. And they do the print on demand. So look, they'll print it and ship it right to you. I think my publisher is going to run a deal on their website, but I don't know the details of that yet. But to find that out, just find me on social media, official JS Clark, and I'll be posting about those kinds of things as well.
Yeah, and I'll have links to all of this in the show notes. So when the book is out, I'll have a link to the book. I'll have a link to your website and all your social stuff as well. So anyone who's looking to get in touch and follow Jeff, just check out the show notes. You'll have all the links that you need right in there. Jeff, it's been a pleasher speaking with you today. I really enjoyed the conversation. I enjoyed the openness that you're able to share with, some of the things that you've experienced in your life. And I think that it'll probably help some people out who might be listening to this. So I appreciate it. And thank you for coming on.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. I appreciate it, man. I'm a big admirer of the podcast and what some of you guys are doing out there in the podcast world. And I just, I really appreciate what you're doing, man. I think it's helpful to people, whether you know it or not. It is absolutely helpful to people. I promise you.
Oh, thanks for that. I appreciate it. Thanks for listening to the Drive On Podcast. If you want to check out more episodes or learn more about the show, you can visit our website, driveonpodcast.com. We're also on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and YouTube at Drive On Podcast.